The second day of hurricane season produces the third named storm of 2020. Tropical storm Cristobal has formed off of the coast of Mexico. We're breaking down where it might turn to next here live on Tracking the Tropics. Hey there, everybody. JB Buno here with you live in our hurricane headquarters here in Tampa, Florida, being joined here by WFLA meteorologist Ian Oliver. Ian, a little bit ahead of the 2 o'clock intermediate update and past the 11 a.m. update, we have the National Hurricane Center officially naming Tropical Storm Cristobal.
Yeah, good afternoon, JB. You said it. This season so far has been keeping us on our toes. We're a grand total now of a day and a half into the new hurricane season, and we now do have our third named storm of the season. So if you were watching earlier, the 11 a.m. update came in from the National Hurricane Center. They said that this system was very close but hadn't yet developed from Tropical Depression 3 into Tropical Storm Cristobal. Well, the hurricane hunters were actually inside of the system when they released that update, and the hurricane hunters, in their passes through the storm, found that it now has strengthened just enough to become Tropical Storm Cristobal. They haven't released their new package of graphics to go along the new forecast guidance with this new tropical storm, but that should happen likely sometime between right now and the intermediate update that comes out at 2 p.m. in the middle of this afternoon. So that's something that we'll be tracking for you. Want to get you a look at this from space. This is a high-resolution satellite picture. There it is, the southwestern Gulf of Mexico, the Bay of Campeche. That center of circulation has gotten much better defined today. A healthier-looking system. That was kind of a blob of convection showers and thunderstorms yesterday. Now it's starting to have a much better presentation on satellite, and the inner structure looks a little bit better, as reported by the hurricane hunters, and that's why they've gone ahead and made this our third named storm of the season. So this is going to be an interesting one to watch over the next few days. It already has been an interesting system to watch over the last several days. If you were with us over the weekend, we were talking about Tropical Storm Amanda, which was the first named storm of the Pacific season. That made landfall in Guatemala. It's a system that over the last several days has been providing very flooding rainfall, unfortunately, very intense rainfall across Central America and portions of southern Mexico. Now this system, after Amanda made landfall and got ripped up by some of the higher terrain of Central America and southern Mexico, reemerged into the southwestern Gulf of Mexico, and now we're seeing it as a new named system here in our basin, the Atlantic Basin, soon to become our third named storm of the year. So the reason you're seeing that on your banner top of the screen, still saying Tropical Depression 3, that information comes into our weather system automatically from the National Hurricane Center. So once they push out their new update, that's where we'll start to see the new information with that. This was the latest forecast track that was issued from 11 a.m., the 11 a.m. update from the National Hurricane Center. And you'll notice the strange part about this system is that it's essentially blocked right now, at least in the short term. There's high pressure above us here in Florida, above the southeastern United States. Don't be surprised over the next several days when you wake up and you see this system has moved little, if any, as it drifts, kind of just wobbles around in the southeastern portion of the Bay of Campeche. It's this weekend where we're going to see this system finally be allowed to pass to the north over the warm waters of the central Gulf of Mexico and then continue to the north from there. So still a lot of uncertainty long-term with the forecast path of this system, but we are seeing at least a slightly better consensus from our long-range forecast models, JB, looking towards the northern Gulf of Mexico, even the northwestern Gulf of Mexico, sometime later this weekend and into the early part of next week.
This is what I was going to ask about, because this is, you and I were talking about this off stream. This is a pretty complex system that we're talking about here. Not real certainty yet. So we show that forecast cone there, but the spaghetti models here, I was going to ask if we had spaghetti models, because this just goes to show just how uncertain we are with this system, even though it's, you know, now a tropical storm in the NHC's eyes. It's still a lot of uncertainty out there, right?
Yeah, JB, sadly, what you're looking at right there is an improvement from what we were seeing yesterday, if you were mentioning.
Right, they were going a little bit more south, a little bit more, they were more all over the place
all over the
yesterday.
place, yeah. So you do see that, it's definitely not a consensus, but you do see that grouping of those individual forecast models thinking with an essentially eventual northward track. Over the next few days, we're really not expecting this to move much, if at all, over the next through at least Friday morning, Friday afternoon or so. That's when that motion off to the north will likely start to happen. But the interesting thing about this system, JB, is that I mentioned a portion of this. There's a broad circulation over Central America. Cristobal is developing in that general broad circulation. Formerly had a name of Amanda as it came from the Pacific Basin, But there is a non-zero chance that Cristobal could actually drift back south onto southern Mexico and lose that center of circulation. That was a forecast, that was a solution that some forecast models were suggesting, losing that circulation and then perhaps re-emerging back into the warm waters of the Gulf and getting a new name as a new system. So the forecast models have a very difficult time keying in on a system until there's a well-defined center of circulation. We talked about that at length last season with a number of the systems that we were dealing with. Now that this center is formed, we'll have a much better idea what this system is going to do in the short term and how that translates eventually over the next several days in the long term.
So looking at some of these spaghetti models, we see that some, go off on a tangent towards Mexico, some towards Texas, one or two here actually towards the Florida Panhandle here. Got to take this with a grain of salt, right, when we're talking about these spaghetti models. But a lot of people, some of our Tracking the Tropics super fans, sometimes ask about the Euro because a lot of fans out there really know that the Euro tends to, in the eyes of some out there, have a little bit more of a degree of certainty this early on when you're forecasting a storm. So what's the Euro saying right now?
It is a reliable forecast model. The Euro generally had that trend of the system emerging into the central Gulf of Mexico come this weekend, and eventually a turn towards the north and northwest of Louisiana or the Texas Gulf Coast. But we should stress with this, as we do with all tropical systems aren't a point, and we don't know what exactly the structure of the system is going to look like at this point. May even be a lopsided system with some subtropical characteristics. So for us here in Tampa, if you're watching from the Tampa Bay area, we're looking at very elevated rain chances later this week into the weekend because we'll be on the eastern side of this circulation. Even if it's several hundred miles off to our west, it is going to help to pull up tropical moisture, enhance our rain chances during the afternoon and evenings with the possibility of some locally heavy rainfall later this week and into the weekend. So there is still a great deal of uncertainty long term with this system. Good news is in the short term, we're not gonna lose it. It's staying right where it is over the next 3 days. It's what happens long term that's still a bit of a question mark, but that has a lot to do with how much land interaction, how healthy this system gets over this next few days as it sits parked essentially in the southeastern Bay of Campeche.
Tracking the Tropics, streaming live here. Meteorologist Ian Oliver. I'm JB Buno, streaming live to apps, websites, and social media platforms. If you're joining us on social media, we'd like to hear from you. Use the hashtag HeyJB or hashtag HeyIan. You see them here on the stripes beneath our names on the left and right side of your screen. We'll take a couple of questions here in the minutes ahead. One of the things I want to ask you about, Ian, when we're talking about relative strength of this, this was, I think that the tweet, and I'll read this tweet out here, earlier from the National Hurricane Center, this came down right at the 11 a.m. update, and they said that this was right on the cusp of becoming a tropical storm, and then it, of course, became a tropical storm about half an hour ago. When we're talking about strength of this as it is now, relatively weak, right? We're talking about primarily a rainmaker, but what could happen with warm Gulf Coast or really Gulf temperatures there as it begins to trend a little bit closer, maybe northward?
A lot of that will have to do in the short term, obviously, if it can maintain its intensity or even intensify in the short term, avoiding some of that interaction with land over the next few days. Once it moves into the central Gulf of Mexico, JB, yeah, what you're saying is now we're talking about an environment that is likely much more favorable for additional intensification. We're not talking about a powerful system here at this point, at least that's what's being currently suggested.
Right, because we have people here in the comment section who are already wondering, what are we talking about, the potential for hurricane status here, or low grade, mid grade, or high grade hurricane status? Way too early to kind of forecast that, right?
It's not out of the realm of possibility that we could perhaps, if this system had some success in the short term, that maybe it could reach hurricane status. Most of the intensity forecasts from the ensembles that we've seen over the last 24 hours or so have this system somewhere into the middle of the road to even a high-end tropical system, perhaps up into the low-end Cat 1. There's a few solutions. That's the official forecast track from the National Hurricane Center, so you can see their best prediction at this point, which will change because of all the uncertainty that I've mentioned here. Right now, they have this as a middle of the road or so towards a high end. By Sunday, maximum sustained winds around 65 miles per hour. So that can present some challenges, wind and rain with this system, but overall, this is more or less what we expect with systems this time of the year. Tropical storms, lower end hurricanes, bringing a lot of wind, a lot of rain. And if you looked at that forecast graphic I actually have pulled up on Weather 4. This is not unusual at all. Yes, we've had a couple of named storms already in the preseason. We're a day and a half into the new hurricane season. We're waiting on the new update that'll officially make this our third named storm of the season. But we're looking at the area where we expect to see these kinds of systems develop in the month of June, and that is the warmer waters of the Gulf of Mexico, JB.
Monitoring your Facebook Live comments here on Tracking the Tropics with meteorologist Ian Oliver. I'm JB Buno. I see a couple of them coming in here using the hashtag HeyJB and hashtag HeyIan. We'll get to your questions here in just one moment. The final question I'm going to ask for Ian here is, Ian, again, we were talking about this being such a strange system, wobbling back and forth. When are we really, I mean, we see here that there's the forecast cone based on the 11 a.m. advisory, but when is that wobbling back and forth, the uncertainty with the track, going to start to form a degree of certainty and perhaps trend northward? Do we have any idea, timetable-wise, what we're looking at here over the next several days?
Well, you did see the improvement from yesterday to today, at least, in terms of the forecast agreement, but again, I do think that there is a good degree of uncertainty. You notice with the forecast cone, the possibility that the center of the system could be anywhere in that forecast cone. A good chunk of it on the southern and eastern side of it is over the Yucatan Peninsula. So that would be a solution that could essentially weaken this system considerably, at least in the short term. And then you also notice there's a portion of the cone that does stay just offshore in the southeastern Bay of Campeche, the southwestern Gulf of Mexico. If it can maintain more of its center of circulation over its energy source, which is that warm water, in the short term it will be a more intense system, certainly as compared to if it drifts back to the south and east over the continent. So that's what we're going to be watching in the short term. I think once forecast models get laser focused in on where it's actually going to be over the next 2 to 3 days, when it stays essentially in place there in the southwestern Gulf of Mexico, that's where we'll really start to see these forecast models improve. Also, that was the first flight into this system this morning by the hurricane hunters. We've talked a lot about how the hurricane hunters basically fly a grid pattern through these systems, sample the storm, and then ingest that information into our forecast models. So the more information the forecast models have on what the current state of this system is in, the much better job they'll do down the road forecasting not only the track of this system, but what it's going to look like, its intensity at that point as we move through the next several days.
Everybody, we got some questions coming in here in the Facebook Live comment section here on Tracking the Tropics. Glad you're joining us here this Tuesday afternoon, June 2nd, second day of hurricane season, third named storm of the 2020 hurricane season. 2 names in the preseason. We had Arthur and Bertha, if I'm remembering my names here correctly, Ian, and now we're up to Cristobal, the third named storm of the 2020 hurricane season. Got a lot of questions coming in with the hashtags HeyJB and hashtag HeyIan. Let's get to a couple of them. Hashtag HeyJB from Kimberly Harris. What are the chances of it coming into Tampa Bay? And then Ashley liked, hashtag HeyIan, will it affect Florida? So we have a lot of Floridians very mindful of what a tropical storm, not even a hurricane, a tropical storm can do if it hits the right place, the right time with the right conditions. So a little too early probably to predict whether or not this impacts Florida. Or you and I were talking about this off stream. There's a chance that we could see dry conditions as a result of this here in the state of Florida, if depending on where this goes.
Should the system pass far enough west, if it made that eventual track closer to the Texas or Louisiana Gulf Coast, yeah, there is the possibility that the bulk of this tropical moisture does stay off to our west. At this point, I would say that you can expect impacts here. If you're watching locally, you know our rainy season has gotten off to a bit of an early start. We've seen good coverage of showers and thunderstorms the last several afternoons. That's really going to bump up our rain chances as we head towards the end of this week and into the weekend. Just the general circulation around this system is going to pull up deeper moisture from the Gulf and the Caribbean, and that will enhance our rain chances. So you can expect that. That's our forecast at this point, moving towards the end of this week and into the weekend, the better rain chances. It's much too early to say, as you notice, as I mentioned, we've only had one flight into this system. It's not expected to move much over the next few days, and there are a lot of factors, not only in the short term, but in the long term, intensity and track of the system. So it's too early to say specifically. Just know that we're going to be staring at this thing all week as it stays essentially right where it is, and then we'll have a very close eye on it this weekend, as we expect it at that point this weekend to move into the central Gulf of Mexico. We wouldn't be talking about a landfall of any type with this system, at least across the lower 48, the Gulf Coast states, until likely the early part of next week. So still close to probably a week away from now.
Mexico sharing a border, of course, with us here in the United States, the state of Texas, to be, of course, more specific. And here, looking here at the state of Texas, we have a commenter here joining us from Texas, and that's Judy Grimes-Harger. Hashtag Hey Ian, does Texas have a real possibility for landfall?
Yes. At this point, I would say the forecast model solutions do towards the early portion of next week, as I mentioned, pull the system eventually from the central Gulf, a turn towards the north and northwest, Louisiana and the Texas Gulf Coast. It's much too early to say that with any degree of certainty. That would be likely what I would say at this point, but that is more than subject to change at this point. So if you're watching from that part of the country, you need to just be aware, have your plan in place. Hurricane season started yesterday, so you should be ready to roll at this point already. Just stay in the know with this system, and we'll be with you every step of the way over the next several days, tracking every update as we get them.
Julissa in the comment section saying here, I wish y'all would listen and stop asking the same questions, in big capital letters saying it is too early to tell if it will hit Florida. And yeah, it's too early to exactly pinpoint where this storm is going to go. I see that Patty Villano was using the hashtag HeyJB. We also had Susan Kenny using the hashtag HeyJB with similar questions asking where this storm might go, but a little bit too early on to pinpoint where this might land. But we're, of course, keeping a very close eye on it here, tracking the tropics, made up of meteorologists from across the United States. Everybody, part of our parent company here, streaming on apps, websites, and social media to keep you informed, alert, educated to the very latest as to what's going on, and making sure that you're also prepared.
One last tidbit, JB.
Yeah. Before we wrap, yes, Ian,
Philip Klotzbach, who is a guru of all tropical climatology and history, he posted that this is actually, once it becomes official, this will be the earliest we've had our third named storm on record. So the forecast, we actually have that pulled up for you on Weather 4. The forecast was for an above average tropical season. Of course, when you have two named systems before the season even begins, you're well on your way towards an above average season. But yes, this will likely be the earliest on record that we've ever had our third named storm. Usually that doesn't happen until August. So here we are on June 2nd. So it's easy to see that, yes, we're well ahead of schedule.
I'm shaking my head only because everyone's thinking it. I'm thinking it. We're all thinking it at home, wherever you're watching from. 2020 has been a brutal year. It's been absolutely brutal. And now we have Ian here telling us that this is the earliest we've had the third named storm of a hurricane season. So this is 2020 has been already a year to remember, to forget, whatever, however you want to describe it. 2020 has been just a brutal year thus far. The pandemic, everything currently we're experiencing across the country with the protests. We're going to keep it onto weather here. We stream with a variety of news topics and a variety of issues, but we're going to keep it focused on weather here. But I know that everyone here is thinking, wow, 2020 has been relentless and continues to be relentless here as we enter the month of June.
It's just one more reason to be prepared, JB. Just take the stress out of it. Have your hurricane plan in place. Have your hurricane supplies ready to go. Of course, as I always mention, none of these are going to sneak up on us here in 2020. We have the technology. We're always watching the tropics for these 6 months of the year and beyond, especially this season. We've been starting a bit early, so just know that we're watching it. We'll get you updated with all the latest information. It takes the stress out of it when you're prepared for hurricane season.
And of course, our meteorologists here on Tracking the Tropics will be keeping you prepared. And hurricanes, tropical storms, whatever it might be, we are tracking the tropics with all of our meteorologists, part of our family of broadcasters here across the United States, including Ian Oliver. We were live with Amanda Holly and Matt DiNardo yesterday. More meteorologists will be joining the program to give you the very latest insight on what we're currently experiencing in the tropics, courtesy here of the app, website, or social media platform that we are currently streaming on. Thanks so much for being with us here on Tracking the Tropics, everybody. We will have more updates as they become available as we continue to monitor the third named storm of the 2020 hurricane season, that being Tropical Storm Cristobal. For meteorologist Ian Oliver, I'm JB Buno. Thanks for being with us. We'll see you soon here on Tracking the Tropics.
Thank you for watching Tracking the Tropics.